Hi, it's Christy of So to Speak, and welcome to my closet. If you are new to the series, welcome. This is it. And if you've been here a few times in my closet, welcome back. I want to share a little story with you before we dive into our next guest on the series. I really have just been thinking about, like that feeling of we are very, very privileged if we are in a home that we want to be in and that we feel safe. And it's not something that you should take lightly. And at the same time, it's not something you should feel guilty about. We all have moments where it's like, oh gosh, there's just a gazillion stories out there that are probably worse than you have it. And it's more about how can you just figure out how to be a little kinder to yourself and gentler to yourself. And so, if that means you have little moments in the day where you look back and say, gosh, that was a really beautiful moment. Awesome. Like there's nothing wrong with that. Like, for example, the other day, my son jumped in bed with me in the morning and we were cuddling all up, and he's wearing a hand me down from a dear friend of mine, a pair of pajamas that are covered in rocket ships. So, of course, I did what any loving mother would do. I held him tight and I serenaded to him, I believe beautifully, David Bowie's Space Oddity. And yes, he did tell me to shut up, but you know what? I kept singing because I'm committed. And what that did was that brought us into the kitchen to make pancakes while my kids danced around the kitchen to David Bowie. I mean, it really doesn't get better than that. It's these little moments that we just are appreciating on such a grander level now. And it's okay to appreciate those. If we can offer anything, if you are one of those people like I am, where you are in a safe home, it's love, it's joy, it's gratitude, it's peace, it's admitting that you sometimes feel grieving or crazy, like all of the above. All of it is golden. All of it is normal. All of the feelings that are coming up, let them flow and surf on them like your life depended on it, because at this point in the game, it very well may, and it may for other people too. So that's my long-winded intro to a guest who is a maker and a shaker, a mover and a groover in our community. He is also known as Mr. Ryan Miller. He is the director of thINCubator, which is an incubator and accelerator. And he also is the host of Rust Belt Startup Podcast. So if you haven't checked that out, I highly recommend you do. And without further ado, I'm going to let you in on my conversation with Ryan Miller.
I think it was on
Enjoy.
Twitter that someone said, stop saying stay at home, start saying you're safe at home. And I
Yes.
was like, oh, that's a great way to reframe that.
Yes.
You know?
You're safe at home. You're helping people by staying like anything other than stay home. Like it's just
Yeah.
this finger pointing, that
Hmm.
vast majority of people don't really gel with. But I've
Right.
also been guilty of saying it because I'm kind of like, it's just such a simple, just do it. But at the same time, you and I are happy to be home. There are so many people who are not happy to be home or in dire
We're
straits.
lucky. I mean, I think, we're in a very, both you and I are in a pretty privileged position, that we have jobs that
100%.
we can do, and we have
Mhm.
supportive families and a
Mhm.
and a home that's safe. I think
Yep.
when this first started, eh, again, this is going back to like just Twitter and reading, when the schools closed, someone was posting like, for a lot of kids, that was their safe space was school. And now we're
Mhm.
basically locking them
I
into a
know.
very difficult environment in a lot of cases,
Mhm.
and that's so we're doing very well, but recognizing that we're in a really privileged position.
So it's like finding that sweet spot between not being naive and not being fearful or
Mhm.
guilty, or finding that balance where you can understand that a lot of people have it worse than you, and at the same time not get so, I don't know about you, but I have a tendency to get very hung up on that guilt feeling of, oh my gosh, there are so many people, like, you can name it. I mean, I don't even want to turn this into a doomsday conversation, but like,
Yeah, no, you're right.
you know,
But you have to, this is a very unique position where it's like, what can you
mhm,
do? Like understanding what you can control, what you can't control. And
mhm.
then, it's just, it happens to be right now, the thing that you can do, that you can control is helping people by not helping people. Like, it doesn't make any sense, but, um,
Helping people
that's
by
hard.
helping yourself. I mean, it's
Yeah. And
really
that's the
that,
hard
like,
part.
yeah, it's so true. And it's, and then once you're helping yourself, how can you help people from afar? Because there's so many
Mhm.
people offering to go to the grocery store and do all that. And I think that's wonderful. And at the same time, your hope is that those people that are doing that are taking the necessary precautions. So it's,
Right.
you can drive yourself bananas. So it's pretty much like, hold yourself accountable, do what you can do, and focus on what you want and what you,
Yep.
instead of what you don't want. I mean, that's like how I break it down simply. Like, my job right now is to be able to coach and have these sessions with people so that they can go back into the workplace and feel better and feel more empowered,
Yeah.
and to be a good mom. I mean, that's how I break it
Yeah.
down. Like, at
Yeah.
the end of the day, I want kids who leave this feeling a sense of safety, a sense of belonging,
Hmm.
and just, and I was listening to your podcast, that you had.
The rambling
So
one.
good. No,
I
it
was
was
just
great.
like, oh my
I
God, I have
have
to
some
think about
comments
this.
about it. No, but you just, like, how you guys are going to come out tighter from this,
Mhm.
having that family dynamic.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. And I've got a whole bunch of other. It's like I'm gonna do like a part two on it, like in the next night or two, just because there's all these things that are in my head, which I don't know that it matters, that they're right, that they're true, but
Mhm,
there's something about like articulating them and putting them out in the
mhm,
universe that
mhm,
is very like. You ever go to sleep and with like a problem? This happens to me quite a bit. Like I'll be stewing on something.
mhm,
I'll go to sleep and I will wake up with the solution.
mhm,
And I think it's that or a solution, right? And
mhm.
that articulation and digestion through even just monologue helps me to process things.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know,
I read somewhere too that, like, even taking that problem, writing it out. Like, are you familiar with Julia Cameron's morning pages? So,
I've heard of morning pages. I didn't know
yeah.
who that is though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so super simple. Three straight pages of stream of consciousness writing
Hmm.
first thing in the morning. Maybe you get a hot tea or hot coffee, and that's it.
Hmm.
Ideally, you write it out, and you only get 3 pages, and that's it.
Yep.
And she talks further about why it's that limited amount. And I appreciate and understand the morning concept, but I also do that at night sometimes. I'm not religiously about it, but same reason. Like,
Yeah.
you have a problem, get it out of your head, so at least it's on the paper, and it leaves more room, I believe, for your dream life to come
Hmm.
alive and to give you that solution that's so clear that your mind might have been bogging it down with.
Yep. Yeah.
So much uncertainty going on right now, right? If you want to speak to just your perspective on, specifically for the workplace, also home, but just like we're leaders, people who are being talked to all the time and asked, and they're like the lighthouse in the storm kind of thing. How can they find some tools of how to deal with this uncertainty without burning out?
I think we were kind of alluding to it earlier that you gotta. I think the analogy that I use is you gotta have some room in the glass because we're in week 3 and like I was on a phone call today with a CEO of a larger firm and they're talking about planning for another 8 to 12 weeks of this and so that's going to change a lot of different dynamics and um, uh, without getting into politics right out of the gate. I remember feeling this kind of same tension after the 2016 election, and can remember speaking to a lot of friends and folks that we were trying to process what that new dynamic and reality was for a lot of us, and you had to kind of keep that same mentality, which was you can't burn out on outrage and sadness. You got to leave some room in the glass because like you got to have some energy for this long term and adjusting and that doesn't mean that you don't feel and that you
Hmm.
don't um grieve or are sad about the situation, but like this is not probably going to be over in 2 weeks. And so one of the things that I've been trying to do is keep a not an arm's length, but maybe a forearm's length from news all day, because it's gonna get worse. And so
Mhm.
um, I don't know. I think everyone's looking to leadership, and so there's going to be people that have to. Um, I don't know. People are looking for, like you said, they're looking for something to grab onto. They're looking for
Mhm.
somebody to tell them what to do and that it's going to be okay. And I don't think anybody knows that yet.
So
So yeah.
can I ask you to speak to that specifically? Right. Like we all are very uncertain, and uncertainty is one of the most terrifying feelings for the vast majority of people, right? We like certainty, we like clarity.
Mhm.
It creates like a sense of safety for us. So specifically for people who are in the leadership role. So when I say that, I'm speaking broader in regards to, yes, entrepreneurs, yes, CEOs, yes, supervisors, managers, and moms, dads, caretakers, anybody who is caretaking, and then also obviously people who are out there in the front lines for all of us. Like, how can they leave that little bit of room for their cup so that they're not like,
Well, you said it earlier, I think before we started the actual recording, which was like reframing can be important. And so instead of stay home, you're safe at home is one way to look at it.
Mhm.
I can't remember who you said was reframing it in a certain way, but
Adam
like
Grant, the
Adam
organizational
Grant.
psychologist. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I
About the
mean, and I
freedom.
think
Yeah,
for me, I think too,
yeah.
it's like understanding what you can control and what you can contribute and what you can't control. And right now,
Mhm.
like there's a ton that we can't control, and so
Mhm.
it's being, I think, aware of where you kind of sit in this crisis, and what do you have to offer other people. Like maybe I don't know how to sew, right, and I don't have a 3D printer, and I don't have the materials to go make masks, but maybe what I can do and what I've been doing is trying to show businesses how to maybe pivot to more of an online model, provide some tech
Mhm.
support in video, you
Mhm.
know, buying gift cards. I mean, there's lots of little things that you can do that can contribute. But
Mhm.
I think for everyone, like to think about how do you leave room in the glass. I think part of it is understanding that it's a marathon, and and maybe get someone to like-minded people are you know simultaneously. The screens that I think are used to divide us are now like the thing that connects us. And
Mhm.
I heard a thing, I don't know who it was the other day, it was saying like um the it wasn't just in the screens. What was it? I think it was Seth Godin. It was talking about like looking at this. I mean, there's been a billion people that have been talking
Mhm.
talking about this, but like looking at this as um this is hopefully the only time in our lifetime that like the world is stopping. Like that's
Mhm.
never happened before.
Mhm.
And what are you going to do with that stoppage? And in there are horrible things happening, and one of the things that I think you can do is to take stock of value. Like, what are the things that you value personally, professionally? What can you learn during this time? And that could be me. It could be learning a new skill. It could be having those conversations with people that you have been putting off for a long time. We have this pause on Earth that has really never happened before. And granted, it's in a pretty bad situation, but like this is a pretty amazing opportunity, I think, for us to step back and think about um, getting away from our normal routine and figuring out, okay, what do we value and how can we change ourselves so when things start to turn again, we come out of this a better version of ourselves. That's a
Mhm.
long-winded answer, but I don't know.
It's
I got a
it's
lot of
so
thoughts around it.
it's so on, and it's actually one of the questions I had down for you, because on your podcast, Rust Belt Startup, you had talked about your fundamental rethinking of value. You're hoping that when we come out,
Yeah,
I believe that's the phrase you
that's
used, I
it.
got it down, was that we have a fundamental rethinking of value, and really a focus on what's valuable to us. So yes, it could be learning a new skill and using this time in that way, where it doesn't help us to sit and feel guilty about that we're healthy and that we have loved ones and we feel helpless. It helps us to be able to utilize that time and to bring more gratitude and joy and love and hope into the world with, obviously balanced with critical thinking and being accountable. But in regards to like what's valuable to us, what a great time right now for the busy, busy, busy like a badge. That was like the phrase for the last, 5 years, maybe longer,
Yeah.
maybe 10. Now everybody gets to chill out. And for some people, it's a long awaited breath of fresh air. And for other people, it's agony. So can you speak to a tip that you would give to the people? Because you do have a great balance from what I know of you. We've known each other for a relatively decent amount of time. And between family and work and doing a lot of productive, when I say, I was steering away from productive, but like purposeful work, right? And at the same time, you're busy a lot. And so, and it doesn't seem to be shallow busyness, but can you speak to the people who this causes agony to them, and maybe what they can do from your perspective to just release the pressure valve around that?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. It's maybe useful to some folks and not useful to others. One of the things I was doing, and I do this on and off, is I used to keep and still do keep like a digital planner where uh, it was stolen and remixed from there's a planner that was referred to me. It was called I think it was like the Best Life Planner or something like that. I can't remember what it was, but I got a lot of value out of this in terms of it breaks your. It was a 12-week planner, right? And so it asks you to think about a thing that you want to do, or I think it was 3 things that you want to accomplish over 12 weeks, and then it makes you break them down and like, why is it important to you, and break them down more, so you have like weekly goals. And so
Mm-hmm.
that was a system that we kind of appropriated for a lot of the work that we do at Think, where it's just reverse engineering. And if you want to eat an elephant, if you want to learn a new skill, like you still got to start with bite, but
Mm-hmm.
it helps to instead of sitting and stewing. I don't think you need to be busy every moment of every day, but
Mm-hmm.
I think, can you create a situation in your life now, which might be crazy, where you accomplish one thing a day that is that's a win for you. That could be personally, professionally, whatever. I mean, we've been thinking about, at home, like I've got a list of things that are like Corona projects, that I've been kind of kicking around, or things that I want to learn about. Um, but also just thinking about, like, during this pause, one of the things that I think people are gonna figure out in one way or the other, and this may divert from the question a little bit, is that we've basically asked teachers to reinvent the education system in 2 weeks, right? We've asked like all businesses to throw people to the wolves and work at home and like figure this out. I genuinely think that for a lot of businesses, not all, and maybe certain segments of businesses, we're going to come out of this by going, you know what, this works. Like, this remote thing works, and this flexible schedule works. And so for me, what I do right now on most days is I batch. So I got 2 little kids,
Mm-hmm.
a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. And so I also want to be a good dad, and what a time to be able to be a little bit more present, for your kids. Um,
Totally.
Totally, right? And
Yeah.
so what I've been doing, and I don't hold myself to this every single day, but like I wake up kind of early, and I triage email that have come from like 5 p.m. till 6 a.m., right? And it's literally just delete, 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 move. I don't respond. I just like
Mm-hmm.
look at the scope of what I'm about to hit, and
Mm-hmm.
then I put the phone down and I go be dad for a while, and then
Can I
I
pause
do a
you for a
batch.
second?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like that alone, what a game changer, right? Like, I
Mhm,
just don't want to breeze past that. Like, being able
mhm.
to take in your email in the morning, and it seems like such a no-brainer, but for a lot of people, including myself, I have a good intention and then I end up going down the rabbit hole. So like, how to go
Yeah.
in intentionally, just realize, batch it up, move things around, delete things, pin
Mhm.
things, whatever it is, and then just have it be an intention, non-negotiable boundary. That's all I'm doing, putting it away, not
Mhm.
answering one email, and
Yeah.
then you go back to your
You'll
day,
get to
your
it.
morning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, for even just for a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
and I read from a lot of people, like, don't pick up a screen, don't check email till 9, 10 o'clock.
Mhm.
For me, sometimes that anxiety gets the best of me. And so I would rather
Mhm.
wake up and the first thing I do is just look and then
Mhm.
try to just do something that's not that. And so that's cooking breakfast
Mhm.
and helping with the kids. But then I typically do like a batch of work in the
Mhm.
morning, and then I take a small break to be with the kids, and then I batch the afternoon, and then I'm dad in the evening, and the
Mhm.
kids go to bed at like 7:30, and then
Mhm.
usually I'll either what I try to do is personal work like after that. So a couple nights a week, and that's making the podcast. There's a bunch of projects that I'm working on. I went down the rabbit hole learning about wine and cheese pairings the other night, and serrano ham. It's just like the most amazing Spanish ham, and I was like, I want to learn everything I can about serrano ham. So I took like a 2 hour deep dive on like the diets of the pigs and how they're raised in the regions, and like that to me is fun, you know.
Yeah, yep.
So I don't know. For me, the batching works. And like today, as an example, my calendar kind of governs my life. So in one of the things that has been very helpful is spending the money on an application like Calendly,
Mhm.
where you especially now that everything's happening in Zoom, there's a lot of coordination, right? There's not a
Mhm.
walking down the hall and, hey, can I pick your brain for a second? Or, hey, I'm just
Mhm.
going to talk to you. Everything's got to be coordinated. And so probably 6 months ago we moved, or 4 months ago we moved to Calendly, where basically if someone wants me, I send them a link, and it's a live Google Calendar view of my life, of when I dictate that I will be available,
Mhm.
and they just pick a day and time that works for them, and
Mhm.
it generates a Zoom link, and like
Mhm.
boom, there we are, right? I don't have to think. You
Yep.
don't have to think. It just goes. And then I also include in that my personal obligations, which takes that out of the availability. And so
Mhm.
to me, there's a lot less time spent on, hey, what works for you? What works for you? Oh, that does, like,
Mhm.
just here's the link. I will be
Yes.
available if you hit the button,
Yes, it's
right?
simpler, it's clear, and if we can, just to go back to one reference
Yeah,
that you
yeah.
said in regards to like, people aren't passing each other anymore in regards to like, can I just pick your brain? Can I ask you a question? What do you feel is the benefit, and if there are any drawbacks to that not happening now that we're in this state that we're in?
Yeah, there's this guy, a great book for people to pick up. I'll call it like the trilogy of books, is by an author who's become a favorite author of mine, Austin Kleon. And his
Mhm.
blog is great, and like his
Mhm.
newsletter is great, but he writes these little tiny books. The first one was the first one called Show Your Work, or the second one was Show Your Work. The first one was called Steal Like an Artist. The
Yes.
second
Yeah,
is,
yeah. I was
yeah,
thinking.
right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
The second one is Show Your Work, and the third
Yes.
one is Keep Going. And they're all fantastic. But one of the things he talks about in Show Your Work is this idea, and it's a Brian Eno term, called a scenius. And a scenius is this idea of like, you know, uh, the way that a genius doesn't exist. Geniuses are byproducts of a scenius. And so what you need to make a scenius is place and proximity for and I don't know if this was Austin Kleon or someone else. They talked about like a place for where ideas can have sex,
Mhm.
right? And like you need that place where it can just kind of naturally happen, and that's what is going to really spark that kind of that water cooler talk, right?
Mhm.
And so when we're remote, that becomes hard to do. Uh, but like I'll give you an example. Like we're starting some coworker lunches with Think, and just like
Mhm.
open hangs with Zoom. And um, so we started our first one today. It was just a lunch, and it was like, hey, anyone come and just like talk, and we'll just hang out.
Mhm.
We talk about whatever. And it's the conversation started. There's like 8 people in the Zoom room, and it started like, hey, isn't this crazy? Like, holy shit, is this the end of the world or whatever? And then it morphed into um, some problems people were experiencing in this kind of
Mhm.
remote life. And then there was a
Mhm.
developer on there, and there's a guy that built chatbots, and we started vibing out like, oh man, can we create this thing that wouldn't it be cool if this existed? And that was like lightning in a bottle. I don't know where it's going to go, but
Mhm.
without having that place for of free form ideation, I think that's going to be
Mhm.
hard. That'll be lost,
Mhm.
but on the other side of it too, I feel like conversations tend to be a little bit more focused when I'm
Mhm.
doing Zoom,
Totally. Yeah. And
so
they're
I don't
on
go
and
over as
off.
much.
I
They're
was
on and
gonna
off, yeah.
say, time-wise, they're on and off, One
Yeah.
other thing that just came to my mind too is that a benefit could be that actual direct reports take time to think something through before just knee jerk reaching out to their supervisor or manager if they did
Yeah.
it right or if they have a question. Like you and I are coming
Yeah.
from different standpoints because of our work. Like
Yeah.
maybe it's more like entrepreneurial from your standpoint. Mine is like, can I pick your brain? Can I ask you a question? You're not, chances are you're not going to do that as much. So you hold yourself
Mhm.
more accountable and there's more of an empowered feeling like, oh, I just figured that out. And usually I would have just walked over to so-and-so's desk and asked them how to do it.
Yeah.
So there are
But
benefits.
that's not going to work for everybody. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's the downside is it's not a universal truth that that people
Hmm.
are going to take that initiative. And so I think what you're going to
Hmm.
find is there's going to be a bifurcation in organizations and businesses of some that like this remote thing is great for either these people, right? And in some cases, it may be completely traumatizing to holding on to culture and
Totally.
and for other people, right? I think it's organization by organization.
So can you speak to that specifically? I had talked to you before about this and like in regards to what you were going to talk about and culture is huge. I'm so glad you just rounded to that. And there were a few things that you had said like, oh, there's options for me to talk about this, this, and this. And I just want to
And I
throw
don't
to
remember
you.
any of them, by the way. So
Amazing.
that's great.
So this is exciting because you wanted an element of surprise.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to, in regards to culture, it might kind of swerve, which is totally cool. One way specific that leaders, that people in charge, whatever that means to you. So we're talking home life, education, workplace, right? Am I leaving anything out? I think
That's all
those
there
are
is
the
right now.
three
It's kind of
biggies.
it's all the same thing right now.
Yeah, those are the three biggies.
Yeah.
And I do feel like it kind of, some of the advice that you hear from, on the home front or work, or it all intersects. You can, it's like a
Yeah.
transferable skill in a way, you can make it your own. So regarding culture, so culture, whether it's education, work life, home life, you can take it however you want. What's one thing that someone who is the head, right? The leader in some capacity, what can they do right now to increase their resilience?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. Like this is the time where I think there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be coming to major life decisions during this crisis as employees, as leaders, as heads of organizations, and I think it's super important to um, to try to convey gratitude and value across these digital pipes in some way, right? Like, and that's going to be different for every organization, but like you know people are going to there's going to be people that are going to choose are going to have to choose between like um employment and caretaking, right? Like, and they're going to choose caretaking every time that they have the option to. Let's understand that. um and on the flip side, if I'm an owner or an employee really, um I think trying to not just gratitude but like honesty, like giving people a sense of like what are you seeing from a leadership position, just being honest. People are surprisingly resilient if you give them the truth.
Hmm.
And so there are a lot of people that are going through layoffs, and there are a lot of people that are having like this week and last week to lay people off, right? And no one wants to be in that position. And so I think honesty is a giant way to maintain trust and credibility.
Hmm.
And one of the things I thought was really cool, was it Larry Gilroy over at Gilroy Curtin and Gilroy, the big
Hmm.
insurance firm. They were working on. They sent out a thing to all their employees, and now they're um, growing this with the Chamber of Commerce. But started here where he said, um, we value all of the restaurants and the small businesses in our community, and so we want to encourage our employees to do takeout. And so we're going to match up to $50 for every single employee to go get takeout.
Oh,
And
that's
so, and I'm like,
awesome.
like, what does that say about the way
Hmm.
that you care about your employees, right? And
Hmm.
maintaining that culture,
Hmm. And
and
the
showing them that you
community.
value.
Yeah.
Totally. And it's
Absolutely.
a win. It's a
Yeah.
win-win.
100%. You just took
You
the
know.
words out of my mouth. Absolutely. Yeah,
And then I was on the
absolutely.
phone. I was on the phone with another CEO today, and his main concern was not how many people are going to either be laid off or or be unable to work. His concern was um, the mental health of their workforce
Mhm.
when this is over, because
Mhm.
of what so many of them are going through, either personally, financially, or with a loved one. Like, there was very little conversation on this conference call about bottom line profitability. And it was
Mhm.
made clear that we're going to do everything we can to keep as many people as employed as we can. But the number
Mhm.
one thing was HR. How are we how are we staffing up HR to really try to take care of people's mental health and well-being
Mhm.
throughout this, and but more importantly after.
And to speak to that too, like right now, people are maintaining, and they're figuring out how to respond to the immediacy of everything. People are inevitably thinking about the uncertainty, and they can drive themselves crazy thinking about
Yeah.
all of these things. What would be a way that you would um, suggest that would be wise for people to strategically look into the future? Like, what is something, without knowing what's going to happen, that people could even start planning?
Yeah. And I may be a bad person to ask about this, because I think about this a lot. And I think I look at it in most cases through the lens of opportunity rather than a lens of fear. In most
Mhm.
cases, not all
Mhm.
cases. Um, there's going to be a lot of businesses that are not going to survive this. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to be affected by this permanently. But I think, how can you I mean, I guess you're asking, like, how do you prepare for the future, or how do you predict it and adapt to? I mean, I guess, what are you looking for, I guess?
So I guess it's either like, how, I guess it's maybe more of the latter, how do you
Yeah.
um, prepare for something that you don't really, I guess it's more out of the question of like, how can you focus on what you can control versus what you can't control? Like, is there anything that you're thinking? One of the other things that you had kind of thrown out as options to talk about is automation. I don't know if that's
Yeah.
something, self-awareness, like
Sure.
just to be able to be. I'm thinking time right now, like time and people and simplicity in a way.
Self-awareness is
Yeah.
is is giant, right? I think understanding um not only what you're feeling, but why you're feeling it, and like
Mhm.
that's okay to feel whatever you're feeling. I think finding I'm going to use the term coach in quotes, but like
Mhm.
finding someone um to 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 bounce things off of and
Mhm.
to gut check you is super important. Like, um i I think it was Seth Godin that was talking about, or no, maybe it was Creative Live. What's the guy's name?
Chase
uh
Jarvis.
Chase Jarvis, right? It was either him or Seth, or maybe it was the interview, and they were talking about, he said, you don't hire a running coach to train you for a marathon so you don't get tired during a marathon. You hire a running coach to train for a marathon because they're going to show you where to put the tired. And I think,
Mhm.
to me, it's the same thing with this, is like, this is long, and you need a coach or you need a partner, not
Mhm.
because they're going to make it easy, but someone to help you find out where to put the tired, and where to put the
Mhm.
hurt, and where to put the
Mhm.
challenge. um, and that's going to be different for different people.
Mhm.
But like, understanding that it's okay to have these things happening. What am I going to do now that I recognize what I can control? Where am I going to put that? And then how am I going
Mhm.
to adapt and move forward? I think is really important for folks.
Mhm.
Like, um, if you are a person that is naturally gonna kind of pull in around here, like, understand that that's the kind of person that maybe you are. Maybe you need some external support, or if and there are also people that have become these overshare, opiners, right? That
Mhm.
maybe what we need to do is take it down a little bit, and take a breath. So I think um, understanding what, I don't say experts are saying, but like, we can make some pretty reasonable judgments around some of the things that are going to change. And to me, some of that is exciting. I think about, you know for organizations that this idea of flexibility and more autonomy works. Like, if we extrapolate this thing out, what does that mean for the commercial real estate market, right? What's going to happen if a lot of businesses say, well, we don't think about the amount that we spend on overhead for an office. Like, is that needed all the time? And what are the implications of that? What does that do to the walkability of downtown? What does that do to
Mhm.
transportation? What does that, I mean, it's going to be pretty crazy, and in that, I think there's also an amazing amount of opportunity, because the other thing that I feel like people are starting to wake up to is not just that, remote work is possible, but, that how, I mean, when look at how fast some of the news is traveling around. I think we've all seen the videos of um, the people in Italy, like, singing on their balconies,
Mhm.
and how, because of these magical panes of glass, how connected we are, and we have the ability, I think, to work more together
Mhm.
on some of these things. So I mean, in trying to reframe it in terms of possibility rather than agony
Mhm.
is not 100%, but like understanding, like,
Mhm.
there's going to be some, you know really interesting things that come out of this. There's
Mhm.
I don't remember who said this either, but someone said, on Twitter the other day, like, there was the people say the world will never be the same, and there was there was the first test of the atom bomb, right? That day the world completely changed, right? It didn't
Mhm.
change everything about the world,
Mhm.
but it changed the world fundamentally, because we now
Mhm.
know that there's this thing, right? And this is going to shake a lot of people. And so, yes, the world will never be the same, but it's never been the same anyway. So,
Mhm.
it's certainly more of a fault line.
Mhm.
But what are we going to do? So what now? I don't know.
Exactly.
That's a
Yeah.
long answer. I don't know.
It's all good.
We got to
I
have a
just let you
sign.
roll. Yeah.
If I go on, you got to go like this or something and be like, wrap it up,
Oh,
wrap
like baseball.
it
Okay. I don't know why I just did. I was my inner Uma
and
Thurman.
my perspective is going to be totally different,
Mhm.
um, than my friend Nancy, who's an ER doctor in New York City, right? Like,
Mhm.
I have the privilege and luxury of being like, well, maybe this is going to affect this and that way,
Mhm.
and she's fighting to keep people alive and doesn't, I think, have the
Mhm.
luxury right now of that. So I think understanding,
Mhm.
again, privilege and position
Mhm.
is like, the you got to check yourself through this process too.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's no, I mean, out of everything that you said, the self-awareness piece, which isn't surprising because that's my wheelhouse of like not being an expert of it. I don't know if anybody really is. I just feel like that's what I'm hearing over and over again about the stories you shared about the conversations you've had with different people and just the resources from Seth Godin, Chase Jarvis. I just heard
Hmm.
something Chase said today too about just being online and how the arts and learning and all of that is so huge right now. Like people are absorbing so much. Fortunately, besides the news or in addition to, I'm hoping people are absorbing more art and learning than the news. But overarching from everything you said, it's like if I'm hearing you right, if someone could take one thing from our conversation, it's to really double down on that human connection with your employees, with the people who you're taking care of, to make sure that they're in a state of feeling safe and feeling resilient. Like we talk about resiliency and safety and all of that, but as a leader who's looking for all of that, it may sound counterintuitive, but it almost seems like by helping other people, you're getting filled in a way.
We've all had an experience where where the expectation of a reciprocity is nothing,
Mhm.
and the feeling that you get, like, we've all had that experience where it's the most amazing feeling ever with no expectations. And that's a good north star to have right now,
Mhm.
to just be a good person. I mean,
Mhm.
I don't know, it sounds so easy, but it's right now, I think that's what a lot of people are looking for. And I think a lot of the other things that we're concerned with, whether that's, we can kind of get in our own heads about all the things that we do, and um in the grand scheme of things, you know, all of that stuff changes the minute that you're touched by this in some way personally, right?
Mhm.
Um, I think empathy is the other big thing, right? Like,
Mhm.
my wife and I have had this conversation a lot over the past couple of weeks about, like, the spring breakers in Florida, and or like, name your issue, you know, politically, socially, whatever, like, until people have empathy for someone that's not like them, until that thing affects them, it's for some folks, it's like, I just, you know, I don't understand it.
Mhm.
I always liken it to, you know, this is now probably 7, 8 years ago, but can't remember the senator, but it was very anti-gay marriage, right? Until their son came out, and he's like, oh,
Mhm.
well, now it affects me, and so
Mhm.
now this matters to me. So, like, why don't we skip that stuff and just try to
Mhm.
empathize, because we don't know. You don't know what employee has a sick relative. You don't know what
Mhm.
employee's spouse or partner is an EMT, or or
Mhm.
an Uber driver,
Mhm.
or a checkout clerk, right?
Or a new
Like, so,
parent and just
or
didn't
a new
get
parent,
sleep and is terrified that their
right?
child's going to be like, it's all of the above, right? So it's
Right.
like paying attention to that. It's reminding me, thinking, just coming full circle to what you were saying on your podcast about like that fundamental rethinking of value. Like, what a beautiful opportunity, to use the word you used before, to come out of this with more empathy, more clarity on what matters to you, more human connection, completely bizarrely enough through the screen, and giving yourself that space. So before we completely close out tonight, just to bring it all home, like, if a leader was listening to this, what would be one thing out of everything we talked about that you would hope that they would put into practice?
I think it's those two things, which is, uh, I guess maybe it's one thing. It's like like empathy, like
Mm-hmm.
understand that right now there are a lot of folks that are in all of our lives that are in crisis,
Mm-hmm.
um, and also I think it's an opportunity for organizations and leaders in particular to do a little bit of a soul search and a reevaluation of, um, you know, what is the value, why does this organization exist, what is the value that we bring to the world. And if,
Mm-hmm.
you know, if you don't have a clear cut with that, like, you've got an opportunity to reevaluate that and figure that out, right? Like, that's exciting to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think, um, that's like on a micro level. On a macro level, like, if there's any macro leaders that are ever listening to this, you know, this is also, I think, a really interesting time for us to be able to have big conversations about big things,
Mm-hmm.
because there are some big things that are broken. And regardless of, you know, what your positions on are, around like healthcare, like, we have to have a conversation about universal healthcare right now, right? Like, we have to have a conversation about the education system. We have to have a conversation about paid medical leave and paid family leave. Like, these are the things that are thrust upon us, and we have this amazing opportunity, because we're now that the exposure of the brokenness is
Mm-hmm.
so out front, the exposure of inequality, economic, and by the way, like, health inequality, right? Like, you and I get to work from home in your linen closet in the basement, and there are
Mm-hmm.
people that are stocking shelves that are making
Mm-hmm.
a lot, not a lot of money, right?
Mm-hmm.
um when we
And
so
risking
I guess,
themselves and their
and risking
family
themselves,
and loved
right?
ones. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think, for, you know, I guess my plea for leaders is, like, understand the micro, and let's
Mm-hmm.
really start thinking about the macro, because
Mm-hmm.
we can have these conversations, now that it's out front of us. It's a great opportunity, amidst a lot of chaos right now. My
Mm-hmm.
point is the
Insight. Yeah.
recognition of
Mm-hmm.
the unbelievable, selflessness that people
Mm-hmm.
are exhibiting in careers and occupations that are not leadership roles, that will get none of the credit for this when this is done,
Mm-hmm.
and they will be, the men and women that made this turn the tide.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. What a beautiful way to end this,
Yeah.
Ryan. Thank you so much for your time. If people want to learn more about you and what you do and your podcast, where can they find it?
Yeah, rustbeltstartup.com, or just punch in Ryan Miller Utica into the Google machine, and some stuff will come up, you know.
I love that you have to throw Utica in because there's probably a gazillion Ryan Millers out in the world.
There's a million of us, a million of us. We'll start a
We're so
club.
lucky.